As with so many forms of powered sport that evolved during the 20th century, powerboat racing has seen its highs and lows. Like its cousins, motor racing and motorcycle racing, what began as motorboat racing has had its share of celebrity, drama, controversy and glamour. Speed and water are a heady combination, an opiate. Power and freedom, but on a liquid edge. Uniquely attractive in the world of power sports. The sport traces its roots to the Edwardian era. While some looked at four wheels or even two as a suitable vehicle for speed, others explored the possibilities on water. And motorboat racing attracted the attention of British newspaper magnate Sir Alfred Harmsworth, who in 1903 created the greatest of boating trophies in his name, pitching nation against nation. After the great transatlantic battles of the 30s, the Second World War intervened. But post-war America took offshore powerboat racing to its heart, and in the 1960s, Europe followed suit when my father, Anthony Needell, ran the first cows to Torquay race.
By the late 1970s, the image of offshore powerboats was firmly established with the general public, particularly in England and in Italy. As the 1980s dawned, the deep V monohull ruled, but Formula One team boss Ted Tolman would win the World Championship with both a monohull and a catamaran at his disposal. The era of tobacco and alcohol sponsorship in motorsports spilled over into powerboat racing. And while individual races like the Cowes Torquay and the Via Reggio Bastia maintained their status, an almost total lack of coordinated promoter management meant the sport as a whole missed an important evolutionary opportunity. While motor racing and motorcycle racing grew rapidly in buoyant economic times, powerboat racing lost its direction. It would take almost another decade for the first Class 1 series promoter to be appointed.
By the late 1970s, the twin-hulled catamarans began to emerge and within 12 years had become the dominant force on the international racing scene. The monohull's position as the symbolic icon of offshore racing had been usurped, and the last to race in the sport's premier category, Class 1, was driven by Norwegians Andreas Ugland and Jan Hillestad.
Ugland's boat was probably the most stylish racing monohull yet designed, with a distinctive wing which could be removed for road transport. Even as late as 1992, its last competitive season in Class 1, the sleek Buzzi design from Italy could give the catamarans a real run for their money.
We have, without doubt, perhaps the best monohull ever made. And that's why we still can run and be, to a certain degree, competitive. We had a fourth place in Marbella, you might remember. And we have been up sniffing a couple of times after that on the top contenders. And a day like this, yes, we can do very well.
How much lift do you get from that wing?
The wing really starts working at about 85, 90 miles an hour. At that time, it stabilizes the boat and also helps us give quite a lot of lift at the back. But of course, it depends a little bit on the adjustments. But we had a good help from Pininfarina in their wind tunnel.
In Class 1, this was the swan song for the monohull. The era of the multi-hull now beckoned, and with it, a headlong charge towards uncertain management and spiralling costs. The future for the monohull was now a cross between rallying and sports car racing, an endurance of the sea.
By the next season, Ugland would be seen in a catamaran as well, while his monohull ambitions focused on endurance races, where a multi-hull had far less a chance of winning. These long-distance races had been popular for many years around the Italian coastline, but their appeal lay with a small group of competitors and not the general public, unable to view the racing over such great distances.
For competitors like Andreas Ugland, loyalties and therefore race budgets were now divided. Some catamaran outfits were unable to compete with the rising costs of racing against teams like the powerful Victory team from the United Arab Emirates, and so endurance races would offer a refuge with classic trophies, but rarely a level playing field. Another driver from the Italian Buzzi stable was Austrian Hannes Bohink. The diesel engines from Seatech, another of Fabio Buzzi's companies, well suited to this kind of racing. Briton Roger Fletcher would enter Shockwave with his son Simon on board. 10 years later, Simon would become part of a new direction for monohulls with the launch of Pro Vee Offshore. But for Ugland, the classic trophies had always been the goal.
You dreamt about the Torquay cows race, you dreamt about the Bastia Viareggio Bastia race, and you talked about the Helmsford Trophy, you talked about Neil's Trophy and these things. Now, we have had a marvelous season. We have won both the Bastia Viareggio Bastia race and the Cows Torquay race, and a couple of other races, and then of course to get then the Helmsford Trophy is absolutely top of the crown.
Since the late 1980s, the pace in Class 1 had been increasing. Speed and water are a glamorous cocktail, and raceboat designers were partway towards finding solutions for protecting the team members, whose number had now been reduced to 2 in each boat. But the safety cockpit was not compulsory, and some competitors hung on to the old ways, ultimately with tragic consequences.
You seem to be dangerously open in the design of the boat. Do you fear for that? Does it worry you?
The cockpit, I saw many cockpits are very dangerous. If you are upside down with the boat and you have an accident, it's not easy to come out because you have the life jacket, then you don't know exactly where you are. This is very, very dangerous.
The tragic death of former Grand Prix star Didier Pironi in 1986, followed 4 years later by that of Princess Caroline's husband Stefano Casiraghi at the Monaco World Championships, had brought the attention of designers towards the need for a safer racing environment for powerboat competitors. Class 1 world champion Fabio Buzzi set about designing a safety cockpit or capsule to protect the team members. His ideas were controversial and revolutionary, but they worked. And before long, he and other designers around the world had a product which would be incorporated into both monohull and catamaran race hulls.
As you can see, the capsule is completely separated from the boat. So with the vertical acceleration at high speed, we are having problems. So now we have a pin inside the boat which is retaining the capsule down. And the pin is controlled by the driver. So in case of accident, the driver can pull and harm and remove the pin, and so in that way the safety canopy is completely separated from the boat.
The detachable cockpit would not be adopted by the racing community. It was perhaps a step too far, but the fixed cell, fully enclosed with a 5-point harness and onboard oxygen, is now the norm. And every year all teams complete at least one full immersion or dunk test to validate their racing license. The need is a very real one, and probably saved the lives of Charles Burnett and Peter Dredge in Fabio Buzzi's Class 2 World Championship winning boat, Buzzi Buzzard. As in motorsport, the link between the commercial market and the racing world is an important one. In the same way that Grand Prix cars are no longer formed from metal tube and handmade aluminium panels, so race boats have come a long way from their early creations. The race world has proved the use of carbon fiber composites, safety at speed, navigational aids and powerful responsive engines. The military market has been one to benefit. Here the monohull reigns supreme, and this has helped the designers seek yet more radical solutions. Just as the winged Fiat Uno had set new directions in monohull design, now Argentinian Daniel Scioli enabled the Italian ace Buzzi to spring this spectacular monohull on an unsuspecting race world and take on the American Superboat Series, winning the world title with diesel power. a matter the petrol-based American race fraternity did not take too easily. This championship win further enhanced Daniel Scioli's standing, bringing him almost legendary status in his home country of Argentina. Soon a new design of boat would emerge from Italy, inspired by La Gran Argentina, one that would be almost perfectly matched against the British Thunderboat, with a single inboard engine and a full safety canopy. Before long, Daniel's younger brother, Nicky Scioli, would contest in this new design and become another contender in Pro Vee offshore.
By now, Class 1 world champion Steve Curtis set about designing a new formula of monohull which would use a single engine unit and a safety capsule. He called it a Thunderboat, and one of the first to appear on the international circuit was in the Caribbean at the Bahamas Superboat World Championships. The design called for a cost-effective package, and as so many race teams would discover, cost control would shape the future of offshore powerboat racing. In Class 1, the disparity between the teams was never greater. Seemingly unlimited funds to support their race campaign put the Victory team in a world of their own, while many of those that remained struggled to compete. Before long, this would start to affect Class 2 as well, where Victory commissioned 2 catamarans powered by BMW engines, and they dominated the World Championships, highlighting the uneven playing field that remained for catamarans and monohulls, both inboard and outboard, and all in the same class.
At the Class 2 World Championships in Abu Dhabi in 2001, the separation between teams was never greater. Calling on every resource available, the Victory team entered 2 exotic catamarans that would have been competitive in Class 1. A strategic alliance with BMW brought with it Formula 3000 motor racing guru Swiss Heini Marder.
Well, I'm in motor racing since 40 years, but this is something new for me and I'm getting very nervous. I had to learn a lot because we only 1 year in this business, and I think we will go every year better.
The Victory team had gone from strength to strength, but the class was in confusion and decline. The established Class 2 teams sought a fresh direction, and waiting in the wings was a new promoter.
Englishman Chris Whitty has a career stretching back almost 25 years in both Formula 1 motor racing and international sports management. In 2000, after discussions with world champion Steve Curtis, he announced plans for a new series. It was called Pro Vee Offshore.
Powerboat racing can be very expensive, and with Pro Vee what we've tried to do is create a class which is for monohull boats with 1,000 horsepower engines, which can probably do about 100 miles an hour. But the most important thing is that the cost, and what we're trying to do is produce a boat that's about the same price as a Porsche Turbo or a Ferrari 360 Modena, which quite a few young guys can afford these days. And for that, they can go and race. As long as the boat fits inside a 40-foot container, we'll be able to actually take them anywhere in the world.
The launch of the Pro Vee concept took place in Southampton on England's south coast. Simon Fletcher, the Class 2 European champion, and his new teammate Chris Charlesworth set the scene for what would become a growing story. Fletcher had already seen the demise of endurance races and his father's boat, Shockwave, consigned to the pages of history. Now he, like many others, sought a new direction. Amongst the assembled press and race teams was Roger Trotman, representative of powerboat racing's world governing body, the UIM.
Obviously with Chris's involvement now and his enthusiasm, I think he can draw these boats back out onto the water and make some very close competitive racing. Monohulls, single engine, single drive. I think potentially there's a commodity here that's going to grow.
But if the idea was to work and be successful, what did drivers like Simon Fletcher feel was needed to appeal to teams like his? The Pro Vee concept would be a development class, and as such would allow for important rule adjustments to be made during its formative stages.
It's the obvious thing to do with the the Class 2 monohulls, which are not competitive with the Class 2 catamarans. It should be a cheaper way of going racing.
In an ideal world, what kind of series would you like to see?
Ideally, I think maybe sort of 8 or 10 races in 4 or 5 or 6 different locations worldwide. Sort of 2 in Norway, 2 in America, 2 in Italy, 2 in the UK, something like that.
The inaugural race in the first Pro Vee European Cup was held in Norway. 2 of the world's fastest qualifying boats entered. Fletcher's Thunderstorm from the United Kingdom, and from Norway, Class 2 world champion Staff. These were tentative steps in a much bigger plan, but the seed of an idea had been sown, and before long would begin to flourish.
The promoter has seen the solution to a problem that has dogged race organisers the world over: the cost of shipping race boats. By creating a set of rules for Pro Vee which ensures the boat must fit inside a container, Chris Whitty has brought his race series within the grasp of event organisers from the South China Sea to the Caribbean. Before long, crowds in cities like Hong Kong and Miami will join those in Dubai and Sydney and thrill to the sight of a closely matched pack of Pro Vee boats racing in their waters.
I think the concept is very good. I think, you know, the whole idea is that we try and construct some boats that are a little bit easier to transport. The cost is not enormous, and they are fast, they are exciting to look at, and they're safe with the cockpits.
You know, we've got some really strong boats, and there's a lot of interest in Pro Vee from all over the world. I mean, I totally and utterly believe in it.
Definitely the Pro Vee is a future class, and it will be take place immediately in the region, and definitely in the world.
The first season ended in the Arab Emirates, with Staff finally crowned Intercontinental Champion at the conclusion of a 7-race season. Two years later, Class 1 world champion Steve Curtis remained as convinced as ever.
Class 1 obviously is a premier class, but this class I think can have more boats in it. I think it can be a bigger class than Class 1, but yeah, it's fantastic. When you consider 3 years ago there were sort of 2 boats hitting the start line, and now we've got 8, and there's another 2 that are probably going to hit us later on in the season. It's fantastic. And also, you know, when other motorsports are dwindling, this one's on the up and up, so it's great to see.
Multi-world champion Neil Holmes had watched Pro Vee from the start. His enthusiasm was unrestrained.
It's got even better. It's a lot more people getting a lot more really good boats together, which is what it's all about. There's a lot of competitive people coming into this particular type of racing, which is really good, because it's, you know, you want actually good class of racing. You don't just want, you know, a procession on the water. There was sort of talk about it sounds a good idea. Well, it's not a good idea, it's actually happening, and people are coming on, you know, strong to get involved with it, which is really good.
It's 2003 and Swede Per Oskarsson with his Norwegian teammate Rune Hoggevold are crowned European champions. So far, most of the Pro Vee fleet has been formed from teams languishing in Class 2 and Class 3 6-litre. Now the success of this new concept is beginning to attract teams from further afield. Briton Carl Jeffrey wants to move on from the successful national Honda class and uses this last Pro Vee event of the season to test the spirit of Arendal with its throttleman Per Carsten Mikkelsen. Carl is used to 70 miles an hour in an open cockpit boat with an outboard engine. The jump up to Pro Vee is not a step, it's a leap.
I give you a little boost now, yeah. Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! You like it? Yeah. It's a little bit scary. Just let me know if you wanted to turn me down a little bit. That's okay. Oh.
The 30-minute test session is over, but will Carl be convinced?
You enjoy it? Yeah, I did. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. There's so much power comes in. Yeah, you know.
Very different handling.
It's different. But it's a similar sort of thing. As it's coming down like that, it's always trying to keep it straight. Yeah. For the cornering, it's very different. Yeah.
Carl's interest is just one of a number that promoter Chris Whitty expects to double the entry list next season.
What we're trying to do now, and what we probably will do next year, is sort of run our own show or take more control over the way that we run our races. I've spent a recent trip over to the States with Per Carsten Michelson, who's the Scandinavian importer for Nortec, and you know they're very keen to produce a boat for Pro Vee, and that would be great to have an American manufacturer come into a European series. For me, would be absolutely sort of icing on the cake.
Pro Vee Offshore has tapped into a rich seam of talent and passion. The desire by many competitors to reach the pinnacle of international monohull racing is without doubt. The Pro Vee formula works. A parity has been identified that enables petrol and diesel competitors to race on level terms. Now, with the announcement of Pro Cat by promoter Chris Whitty, the destiny of international offshore racing looks set to grow. Very good news for those that love life on that liquid edge. And much needed at a time when the future of so many other powerboat classes is still very much in question.